Let's rewind to a time when the video game industry was on life support. Arcades were still alive, but at home, things were grim. The market was flooded with broken promises, shovelware, and consoles no one trusted. Then, in 1985, a grey box from Japan landed in North America and quietly began to rebuild the entire industry from the ground up. That console? You already know it was the NES, but calling it just a comeback machine doesn't do it justice. The NES didn't just revive gaming, it defined it. Before this thing hit shelves, the console landscape was chaotic. There was no clear leader, no quality control, and worst of all, no consumer trust. After the crash of '83, most retailers wanted nothing to do with video games, so Nintendo had to get clever. They marketed their console not as a video game system, but as an entertainment system. That's why it came with a robot. ROB wasn't just a toy. He was a Trojan horse, sneaking the NES into skeptical stores. And it worked. Once the system was in people's homes, it was the games that did the talking. And oh man, what games? The NES didn't just offer good titles, it delivered iconic ones. Super Mario Bros. Redefined side-scrollers. The Legend of Zelda introduced save files and open-ended exploration. Metroid combined atmospheric isolation with non-linear gameplay. These weren't just games, they were blueprints. Developers all over the world took notes. Genres that barely existed before were suddenly solidified because the NES showed the world how it was done. But it wasn't just about game design. The NES pioneered a new relationship between hardware and software. Nintendo's lockout chip system meant third-party developers had to get licensed. That gave us a consistent level of quality control, which was unheard of at the time. While it did give Nintendo enormous control over the market, it also shielded consumers from the chaos that ruined the previous generation. It created a standard. And when standards exist, people can trust the brand again. Graphically, it pushed boundaries too. We take pixel art for granted now, but the NES era is where that art form matured. Limited palettes and memory restrictions didn't stop developers. They got creative. Sprite-based visuals became iconic, and soundtracks composed, with just a handful of channels, are still being remixed today. Those bleeps and bloops, that's the sound of gaming's heartbeat starting up again. And let's not forget the controller. 2 buttons and a D-pad might sound basic now, but at the time, it was revolutionary. No more awkward joysticks or weird keypad layouts. The NES controller was intuitive, responsive, and ergonomic. It didn't just influence future Nintendo controllers, it influenced all controllers. By the time it had fully taken over American living rooms, the NES had become more than a console. It was a gateway, a new cultural pillar, a pixel-powered revolution hiding inside a grey plastic shell. What truly set the NES apart wasn't just its hardware or software, it was the mindset behind it. Nintendo didn't treat the console like a one-and-done product. They approached it as a long-term ecosystem, laying the foundation for how future platforms would operate. From the design of the cartridges to the licensing model, everything about it was intentional. Not just to sell units, but to rebuild trust in gaming itself. Nintendo knew the only way to restore confidence after the crash was consistency, so they created the seal of quality. That little gold emblem wasn't just a sticker, it was a promise. And to live up to it, they enforced strict licensing deals. No more random buggy third-party releases clogging the shelves. If a game came out on the NES, it had to meet a standard. That was a game changer. It told parents, players, and retailers, this system is different. But the NES wasn't just about restrictions, it was a launch pad. Capcom, Konami, Tecmo, Hudson Soft, some of the biggest names in gaming history cut their teeth here. And they didn't just publish, they innovated. Mega Man 2, Castlevania, Contra, Ninja Gaiden, these weren't just hits. They were game design masterclasses. They pushed the limits of what 8-bit hardware could do and laid the groundwork for entire franchises that still exist today. Even visually, the NES was ahead of its time. Those black pixel art inspired game boxes, the red seal, that branding gave every game a cohesive identity. It made the NES library feel like a collection, not just a pile of random cartridges, and that built trust. Even if you hadn't heard of the game, if it had that look, that seal, you gave it a shot. Then there's the cultural legacy. For many, the NES was their first taste of gaming, their first controller, their first final boss. It turned family rooms into arcades, weekends into tournaments. It was more than entertainment, it was bonding. Siblings passed controllers, friends huddled around the screen. That ritual of blowing into cartridges, iconic. The NES didn't just deliver games, it delivered moments. Its limitations were also its strengths. Developers had to work with tiny memory, limited palettes, and strict sprite limits. But that didn't stifle creativity, it ignited it. It forced smart-level design, unforgettable music, and gameplay that respected the player's time and attention. It taught through play. You learned by doing. And once you got it, it clicked. And the world noticed. The competition started taking notes. The idea of tight quality control, of a mascot-driven brand, of a universal controller layout, that all started here. The NES became a template not just for consoles, but for an entire industry. The grey box under your TV wasn't just a toy, it was a revolution. As the NES reached the height of its popularity, its influence stretched far beyond gaming. It reshaped pop culture itself. Suddenly, characters like Mario and Link weren't just sprites, they were stars. They appeared in cartoons, cereal boxes, lunchboxes, comics, and even a feature film. For the first time, video games had icons with mainstream recognition. The NES didn't just succeed, it dominated, and in doing so, it made gaming a central part of childhood across the globe. But its real power came from its accessibility. The NES didn't feel intimidating. It didn't overwhelm with specs or complicated setups. You just plugged it in, popped in a cartridge, and turned it on. That simplicity welcomed newcomers while offering depth for veterans. It bridged the gap between casual curiosity and hardcore fandom. The NES made gaming inviting, and that spirit carried forward into every successful console that followed. Even educational and experimental games found footing on the system. While most remember the platform for its classics, it also played host to niche and strange experiments, edutainment titles, peripherals like the Power Pad and Zapper, and even early attempts at RPGs and text-based storytelling. That wide variety encouraged developers to take risks. The NES was a sandbox and creators ran wild in it. It also laid the groundwork for what we now call console generations. Before the NES, new systems came and went with little fanfare. But when its successor finally arrived, the world treated it like a passing of the torch. Suddenly, consoles had life cycles, expectations, legacies. The NES taught us that a platform wasn't just a machine, it was an era. And when that era ended, people looked back with reverence. And it still hasn't faded. To this day, NES games are re-released, speedrun, remixed, and celebrated. Whether it's reissues on virtual consoles, modern 8-bit inspired indies, or anniversary collections, the system's DNA continues to run through the veins of gaming culture. Developers still reference its design philosophy. Players still seek out its challenges, and collectors treasure its physical presence. That's respect. Even emulation and preservation movements owe a debt to the NES. It helped spark the realization that video games are more than disposable fun. They're cultural artifacts worth saving. The community-driven efforts to archive, document, and restore NES history are a testament to how much it meant, and still means, to the people who grew up with it. Most consoles come and go, but the NES transcended that cycle. It became a foundation. A proof of concept for what gaming could be when done with purpose, imagination and heart. It turned developers into rock stars, players into lifelong fans, and video games into something permanent. The NES didn't just bring games back from the brink. It built the house we still live in. And decades later, its 8-bit heartbeat is still echoing. One chime, one jump, one fireball at a time. For me, this isn't just history, it's personal. I was born in the late 90s, long after the NES had changed the world. By the time I was old enough to care about games, people were already talking about memory cards and analog sticks. But tucked away in my parents' closet was a relic from their childhood. A grey, dust-covered box with a stack of old cartridges and controllers, with red buttons that barely clicked anymore. That was their NES, and somehow it became mine. My first real gaming memory wasn't on a PlayStation or a GameCube. It was sitting on a bedroom carpet, staring at a fuzzy CRT, trying to figure out how to make Mario jump. My parents had to show me. They laughed when I ran straight into the first Goomba, and I laughed too. I didn't know it then, but I was playing the exact same game they had fallen in love with as kids. That moment connected us, not just through family, but through gaming itself. I didn't care that the graphics were old, or that the sound was all bleeps and bloops. To me, it felt like pure magic. The NES didn't feel outdated. It felt alive. Every cartridge had its own world inside. Every reset felt like a fresh start. I remember struggling through Mega Man 2, discovering secrets in Zelda, and feeling like a hero every time. I cleared a tough level in Super Mario Bros. 3. Those experiences shaped the way I see games, and even the way I think. That old console wasn't just a toy. It was a teacher. It taught me patience. It taught me how to observe patterns, how to stay calm under pressure, how to fail and try again. The games were challenging, but never unfair. They didn't hold your hand, but they respected your time. And as a kid, that made every victory feel earned. No XP boosts, no tutorials. Just you, a controller, and the will to keep going. Even as newer systems came and went, I kept going back to that NES. It never lost its charm. In fact, the older I got, the more I appreciated it. I started to wonder who made these games, why they were so good, and how the developers worked with so many limitations. That curiosity led me down a rabbit hole of game history, design and retro collecting. All of it because of one simple moment, a kid blowing on a cartridge, hoping it would start. And it always did. That's the part that sticks with me the most. No matter how old or worn out it looked, the NES still worked. It still delivered. It wasn't just my parents' console anymore. It became part of my childhood too. And in that strange, wonderful way, the NES didn't just introduce me to gaming, it defined it. For them, for me, and for anyone lucky enough to press start on that journey.